Hi, everyone. We welcome you to a brand new interview on doing sociology. And today we have with us Dr. Nabanipa Bhattacharjee, who teaches at Sri Venkateswara College, University of Delhi. She's been teaching in the institution since 1999. She is involved in research and related activities in India and abroad and publishes in both academic and the popular press. Her research interests include historical and political sociology, partition, migration identity, anthropology of violence, Northeast Indian societies and cultures. And she's going to talk to us today about Sylhet and the partition, understanding the Bengali presence in Northeast India. Welcome, ma'am. We're very glad to have you with us today. So we'll begin with our first question, and there are considerable misunderstandings or misconceptions about Sylheti presence in the Northeast. If you could let us have a sense of these and explain what could possibly account for this.
Right. Okay. Now, to begin with, of course, I must thank Professor Maitreyi Chaudhary and all of you, Rituparna and Dipali, for having me in this session of doing sociology. And this has been a very, very popular, blog, a space where young and old have contributed. And I really, look forward to having a nice discussion on this. Now, this has the theme, Sylhet and partition, something similar that I had, addressed in my PhD thesis. And subsequently, I did write a few pieces, here and there, some in journals, addressing the issue. Now, in order to, get sense of this misconception and, about the Sylheti presence in Northeastern India, we need to go back in history to the 19th, century. And there's something very interesting which happened in the 19th century and which never figured in the annals of partition studies, and that is that Sylhet, of course, was part of the Bengali presidency. It was a Bengali, speaking district in Bengal, and in 1874, that's when we kind of begin the modern history of Sylhet, and it's linked to Assam actually. And that is what, because Assam was, the largest, province in Northeastern India. And I'm talking about the 19th century. So in 1874, Assam was then part of the Bengal presidency. Assam was annexed to the British Empire in 1826, following the signing of the Treaty of Yandabu. This is common history, everybody knows. What they probably don't know is that in 1874, Assam was created as a chief commissioner's province, taken out of the Bengal presidency, and this new province was created. And to this new province of Assam, a number of districts from Bengal were included. And one was Sylhet, which was a Bengali-speaking district, but it was included in Assam, and it was done as research shows to, of course, increase the revenue, potential of Assam, which was, of course, at a deficit in the 19th century. Sylhet, with its tea gardens, of course, was included, therefore, in Assam. Along with Sylhet, there were other, districts like Kachar, for instance, which continues to remain in Assam even today. In southern Assam, which is known by the epithet Barak Valley. That's where, Kachar is, plus the hills, Naga Hills, the Lushai Hills, the Khasi and Jaintia Hills, United Khasi and Jaintia Hills, and Goalpara, right? These were the places which were taken out of Bengal presidency and included in Assam. So that's how the Sylheti presence kind of officially, begins in Assam. And for the next, from 1874 to 1947, Sylhet continued to be in Assam. Of course, what we see is that Sylhet and Sylhetis, the Bengali-speaking Sylhetis of Assam, continued to resent their presence in Assam. because they did not want to be in Assam. They wanted officially, administratively, to be part of Bengal. And we have a Sylhet reunion, Sylhet Bengal reunion movement in the 1870s and 80s, which campaigned for, severance from Assam and reunification with Bengal. That reunification, of course, did not happen. And as a result of which the district continued to remain in Assam for a brief period between 1905 and 1911 because of the partition of Bengal. Sylhet became part of Bengal again, Eastern Bengal and Assam, as you will probably know. And but again, the partition was annulled and Sylhet was back in Assam. So there was a faint kind of ray of hope that Sylhet would again go back to Bengal, but that did not happen. And that went on until 1947, when Sylhet had to go through a referendum. And so I'll probably come to that later. So this is a kind of a very brief, the historical, background of the Sylheti presence in northeastern India. So far as the misconception is concerned, I think the Sylhetis were, lawfully lodged in Assam, right? So, and it was because of, compulsions of the colonial state that a particular group of people who were Bengali speakers came to be lodged in a state, or in a province then and a state now, which was technically not Bengali, right? It was technically, meant for the Assamese, quote unquote. And we know that, in contemporary period, the kind of debates we've had these debates, in fact, for a very long time, but the fresh trigger was, of course, the NRC and the CAA, and the question has again, opened up, the central question: who belongs to Assam? So that kind of explains, until the partition, the Sylheti presence in northeastern India in general and in Assam in particular.
Right. So, ma'am, when we talk about Sylhet, it's also mostly absent from partition studies of India. We generally focus more on, of course, Punjab and the northern part of India. So how do you suggest that this gap may be filled, in how, because it's not easy to talk about history in ordinary public discourse as we are figuring it out, every day, as you also spoke about how misconceptions exist. So how do you explain the invisibility, as well as if you could suggest how this gap may be filled?
Sure. Actually, the gap in partition study. So when partition was, a traumatic event for, particularly for the people of Punjab and Bengal and also Assam. And when partition studies, took off, partition studies, as in the genre of partition studies, that was pretty late. Usually partition was studied in the context of independence of India, and there was a particular way in which historians treated, the partition. And when it all began, it took off, and we have a number of, very good scholars working on, who initially, started writing on the partition in India. I can think of Mushirul Hasan, for instance, a very important text, called India's Partition, Process, Strategy and Mobilization, published by the Oxford University Press. I think, and it had a good collection of articles. So very slowly, and I think that happens, once something happens, something big like this happens, a traumatic, event, it takes a while, before, people start responding to that event, that thing in history, and particularly if it's of a traumatic nature. So that is what, happened in case of most of Punjab and Bengal. But we see, a lot of focus in the early period, early works on Punjab, mainly Punjab. Bengal slowly came in. And one reason was, of course, and which is not really the correct, way to approach the partition, was because the violence was more, in Punjab. compared to, it was almost like a competitive thing about trauma, as if, that one community was, faced more trauma than the other. But the point is that there are different kinds of trauma, right? That was one important factor. So very slowly then, Bengal comes in the context of Bengal. I remember a very important book by Ranabir Samadar, edited by, called Reflections on Partition in the East, which had very good pieces, including one by Bhattacharjee called Second Partition of Bengal and so on. So Bengal partition also is in fact an underworked area, right? And then of course we now come to Sylhet. Now Sylhet is interesting also because referendum was held in two provinces of two districts of British India. One was the Northwest Frontier Province, that was a province, and this was just a district of Assam, part of Assam. So, but history, we have records now which shows that, that the Muslim League was of course interested in Sylhet, because by that time Sylhet was a Muslim majority district, right? Surma Valley Surma Valley division of Assam comprised of two districts. One was Kachar and the other was Sylhet. Kachar was not technically Bengali, but heavily influenced by, Bengal. We can, if we can say that. So, but the demand was, of course, for, inclusion of Sylhet in the partition, scheme. But in the 3rd July, announcement made by Lord Mountbatten, the last Viceroy of India, in the partition plan, it was, announced that Sylhet would go through a referendum, right? Because Sylhet was not technically in Bengal, but in Assam, and Assam was not a Muslim majority, province. So the entire Assam could not have gone through the partition or, that process, because Assam was not, Muslim League did not claim entire Assam, it only claimed at that point, in our context part, Sylhet. So a referendum was, announced in Sylhet, and Sylhet went through a referendum in July 1947. And that's how, the Muslim League won the referendum, and Sylhet became part of East Pakistan. Now, the reason why Assam, Sylhet never, or figured very late, in fact, for the first, on record, there were Bengali books, on Sylhet referendum and, eventual transfer of Sylhet to East Pakistan. But one important reason, as I have said, I wrote an EPW piece long time ago in 2010, and where I argued that that one very important reason of not really including Sylhet, in partition studies was because Sylhet belonged to Assam. Technically, it was part of Assam. So it was a Bengali, speaking district outside Bengal, and it was a non-Assamese district in Assam. So, Sylhet's tragedy was kind of, it was twofold, right? So it was a Bengali speaking district out. So nobody really cared about Sylhet, technically speaking, because it was kind of stuck in between, So that is the reason. The other interesting thing, and precisely because Sylhet was lodged in Assam and it was a non-Assamese, speaking district. Therefore, technically speaking, Assam also went through a partition because a part of it was severed, cut off and transferred to East Pakistan, right? But if you look at the writings on Assam, history of Assam, I think Amalendu Guha, there's just a footnote treatment on Sylhet. Amalendu Guha writes a bit in his Planter Raj to Swaraj. There's a very brief mention, but very important mention. I think we owe this to Amalendu Guha, this great thing that he writes in Planter Raj to Swaraj. But otherwise, if you look at the histories of Assam, or scholars, who would write on Assam that period, there is no mention at all of Sylhet. Very little mention of Sylhet. In fact, in contemporary times, I can only think of Sanjeev Barua. In fact, it is he who took an active interest and, came out with his book and his essays on And he realized that, that it was important to engage with this question, because I think the inclusion of Sylhet in 1874 is one of the most defining features of Assam's history of past. And it was very important to engage. So it was never called Partition of Assam, right? So Sylhet figured neither in Bengal nor in Punjab. So from the mainstream historiography, partition historiography, Sylhet went on missing for a very long time. For the first time, as I said, in the in recorded history, I think it was Anindita Dasgupta's work on Sylheti refugees and migrants, as a journal piece published somewhere around 2006, I think 5 or 6. But I'm not, I may be mistaken about the year of publication. And now we have, some scholarship here and there on Sylhet, but so much needs to be done, because I think Sylhet's quote unquote ouster, because, Assam Congress very seriously wanted Sylhet to be out, and, the Bengalis of Sylhet to be out of Assam. And 1947, the referendum gave it was a great chance and a great scope. Of course, the problems of Assam was not solved with the ouster of Sylhet, and this is all recorded. It's all written, so you can look up your history works, and we can see all that. But that is the reason why for a very long time nobody spoke about Sylhet. Sylhet made any scholarship on, the scholars very uncomfortable, because this was a part of history nobody wanted to engage with, right? Because it's not a very, not a nice, not a kind, history. So, yeah.
I think it's still making people uncomfortable. It's
very
going
uncomfortable.
on.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Can we also talk a little bit about Sylheti identity and its representation in India, particularly in the Northeast region? Do you think there has been any shift over the decades?
Yes, in the sense that, of course, as I have argued in my work, that Sylheti identity, in fact, what I call Sylheti identity, and I introduced a concept, I called, I call Sylheti identity a distinctly fused identity. And this distinctly fused means the distinct part is the Sylheti part, and the fused part is fused with the larger Bengali identity, right? So the Sylhetis carry both, right? There is a sense of, and this is because of the way Sylhet was located, in the 19th century. So I think that made a total difference, to the emergence of this kind of an eventual articulation of this kind of this identity, this Sylheti identity. Which is part Sylheti, which is part Bengali, because at no point in Sylheti identity discourse, Bengal was done away with, right? Because that was the universal identity that continues to remain the main identity. So, but at the same time, because of Sylhet's location outside Bengal, what I have argued is that a distinct Sylheti identity also took shape, and that was because of course, political reasons, its location. But we see in the course of, 100 years, 1874, not 100 years, 1874 to 1947, and thereafter, this great urge to tell the world and to tell themselves that, that Sylhetis are a community with their own dialect, own set of cultural values and, norms, marriage rituals, and everything is distinct. So this urge to be distinct, I say that, it came out of very, solid material reality. And we see that reflected in the kind of history that was being written on Sylhet, in the early 20th century and so on. After partition, of course, we see a shift in the during when Sylhet was part of Assam up until 1947. We see, Sylhetis establishing associations outside Sylhet, So the first Sylhet Association was established in Calcutta in 1876 and established by, well-known leaders like Bipin Chandra Pal and others, right? So they were all of, origin, their origin lay in Sylhet, and they established, and this was all to nurture and preserve that identity. In the second half, this became a discourse of, lament. There is this constant tragic tone. One of my essays, the title is "We Are with Culture and Without Geography." So this is a, expression which a very elderly, an elderly gentleman who is associated with the South Calcutta Sylhet Association told me that, the saddest part is that we do not have. So this loss of territory, is a constant, thing in the discourse of the current, Sylheti identity in the Northeast. Sylhet, large tracts, in fact, entire Sylhet was separated and transferred to East Pakistan, but part of 3.5 thanas, as they say, remained in India, and that is what is Karimganj, which is part of Assam even today. And Barak Valley, because it was, Kachar was part of the Surma Valley division and heavily influenced by Bengal and Bengalis of Sylhet. So Barak Valley today is in Assam, is the Sylheti hub. Shillong used to be that space, because Shillong was the capital of Assam, right? But after partition and after the creation of Meghalaya and the developments that we see post 1947 in northeastern India, the anti-Bengali movement that we see all over northeastern India, particularly Assam, and then later, of course, Meghalaya. And to that issue was also clubbed the illegal immigration issue, and move of, Maimansingh Muslims, which also happened in the 19th century to Assam. So therefore, we do see, this. I think if you want to talk about this shift, the shift is that the identity remains, but of course it is diffused, and the lament remains. But if you come from northeastern India, there is still a very there is a strong sense of, of being from the other side, right? So the fact that the homeland lies, elsewhere. So at some point, it influences, the identity. For instance, if somebody asks, it's a very simple question. I also grew up in Shillong. I believe you are also from Assam. Rituparna, and so I've shared this with Maitrey ma'am, that she also grew up in Shillong. I also grew up in Shillong. It's a very simple question. If somebody asks you, where are you from, and you say you are a Bengali, the assumption is that you are from West Bengal, you are from Calcutta, right? But West Bengal. So it's been very hard for many of us to explain that that I'm not from Calcutta, in the sense I was not born in Calcutta. I was not raised in Calcutta. Of course, we have connections, very, strong, deep connections with Calcutta. But Shillong continues to be my home even today. So it's been very hard to explain, because the next question would be, how did you, land in Shillong? What happened? Why Shillong? Because we associate a particular culture, a particular language with a territory. And that all of us, most of us have faced, trying to explain this whole thing, that this is how, this is the reason why I was born in Shillong, because my parents came from a particular place, partition happened, Sylhet was transferred, and so on and so forth. So, of course, there is a confusion, and this confusion is this, this disjuncture of territory and, and culture. And this is, I think, this we continue to grapple with, and we will. Yes.
Right. So the next question to you, in fact, there are two parts to this question. One is, firstly, if you could tell us, how does the community itself the Sylheti community seek to affirm its identity, its distinct identity? And has there been a shift in this identity over the decades? And the second question, the second part to it is, if you could tell us a bit about the distinctions which exist between the Hindu and the Muslim Sylhetis in the Northeast.
Very important question. Yeah, thank you. Your first question was, what is, how do they, what is very distinctive, or how do they preserve, or, yeah. See, the children of migrants, my family, for instance, was technically not, technically not a migrant, because, but then, in a sense, every Sylheti who lives in India actually belongs to Sylhet, and which is on the other side. So that's a fact. So one used to be through language. And language continues to be a very important marker of that identity. But there is also, because of this, what I have called a distinctly fused character of Sylheti identity. So in middle class, homes, upper middle class homes, Sylheti homes, Hindu Sylheti homes, the stress would always be on speaking, the standardized, proper, quote unquote, Bengali, and not the Sylheti dialect, right? So it was one way of preserving that identity was through language, but we were not encouraged. So you will not find many Sylhetis, for instance, particularly those brought up in Shillong, of belonging to a particular class, speaking that dialect, but they're, of course, aware of that, dialect. The other important way in which, Sylheti identity was, articulated, practiced, preserved, written about, was through these associations. And this is something I have not published, but I did work on at length on the Sylhet associations. As I said, that the first Sylhet association, and I think the Sylhet associations played a very important role in, at least outside Northeastern India, in preserving Sylheti identity. In the Northeastern India, so one was 1876. The second association which was established was in Delhi. And not many of us would be aware that Delhi has a Sylhet association, which runs out of Chittaranjan Park and in the A block, and it has a building of its own. It has a Bipin Chandra Pal Memorial Trust. It holds functions, and it came into existence right after partition. And very well-known, bureaucrats, literators, scholars were involved in the establishment of this institution, the Delhi, Sri Sammilani Delhi. And they did a great job in, preserving this identity. In the Northeast, these associations were not really required, because until 1947, of course, Sylhet was part of Assam, right? And, Sylhetis were there, where their land was, they were there. So there was no extra need to really, articulate that identity. But after partition, the job of preserving this identity fell on Barak Valley. And it is because, as I have argued, that it's because of retention of those 3.5 thanas in India, by India in 1947, right? Which is what Karimganj region is all about. So that's the original Sylhet, that's part of Sylhet, because Karimganj was a subdivision of Sylhet, right? So that remained in India, as a result of which, in a way, Sylhet really never went out of India. Of course, large part of its territory was transferred to East Pakistan, but a portion of Sylhet also remained in India. So Barak Valley became, that space, and it took upon itself to, to be, take over this identity discourse of Sylhetis. But very interestingly, just one last point, the language movement that you see in Assam in the 60s, right, which led to the Official Language Act, as you will be well aware, all of this was done in the name of Bengali and not Sylheti. So it was the Bengali language. So it's very complex. If you look at Assam, I can go on, and it's really very complicated. So I think Barak Valley has now taken up that thing, and Shillong, which used to be another important site, a large number of Sylhetis left the state. And the migration began 80s onwards because of various reasons, and one being, of course, the situation that developed in Meghalaya during the Assam movement. So it was a simultaneous thing. So Assam movement happened in 1979, took off, and its impact was felt across northeastern India, which was an anti-outsider movement. So so it's tragic, but large population, so we see an exodus of Sylhetis, right? Coming to the second question, I don't know if this answers the question you raised. Coming to the second, the relationship between Sylheti Hindus and Sylheti Muslims. Sylheti Hindus and Muslims after 1874, after what I call the first partition of Bengal, right? That's of course not written anywhere. The partition of Bengal is 1905 and then 1947, but 1874 again, as I told you, a large territory was included in Assam. So Bengal was in that sense partitioned. So from 1874 to say about 1910-15, we see a concerted effort, united effort by the Sylheti Hindus and Muslims of Sylhet to reunite with Bengal, right? But Bengal kept on rejecting, this offer. That is also very interesting. So in a way, there was no option but to remain in Assam, as I said. And that, of course, also led to the kind of politics that we see developing later in Assam. So we see a united effort, but the political scenario in general in India and in Assam underwent a change 1910-15 onwards. The Muslim League was established in 1906 in Dhaka. We see the impact of the politics of the Muslim League in Assam, 1915, 1920. That's by the second decade of the 20th century. We see that the Sylheti Hindus continue their, their demand for unification with Bengal, but Sylheti Muslims then insisting that they remain in Assam, right? So we see a kind of a split, by the second decade of the 20th century. And the partition, referendum and partition of Assam in 1947, the Sylhet referendum and partition shows that a deep, divide had, already set in between the Sylheti Hindus and Sylheti Muslims. It's very unfortunate, but that is what, happened. And therefore the Sylheti Hindus, of course, by 1947 wanted to be in Assam, and Sylheti Muslims now wanted to be part of Pakistan. So what we see is that 1874 to 1915 or 20, say, united in their effort to go to Bengal. For some time, Sylheti Muslims wanting to stay on in Assam, and this is influenced by various other factors to which I will not go, other developments with the arrival of Muslims from Mymensingh, line system, so on, kind of politics that went in Assam during those very critical years. And then subsequently in 1947, we see the Hindus now wanting to stay in Assam, right? Bengal was, of course, out of the question, and Muslims now wanting to be part of Pakistan. So this was basically the scenario until 1947. After 47, we, except for Barak Valley and parts of Karimganj and Hailakandi, there are 3 districts in southern Assam, right? Kachar, Hailakandi, and Karimganj. And two are Muslim majority districts. And of course, Karimganj is a Muslim Sylheti Muslim majority district. Relations are amicable. Well, yes. And but we also have Muslims of Kachar origin. So there are different kind of identity assertions within Barak Valley, to which of course we will not go here.
Right. So the last question is about the Sylheti presence in Britain, which is more popularly known in the popular discourse, as well as perhaps within sociology or social anthropology. So do you see any connections between Indian and Bangladeshi Sylhetis in the diaspora?
This is really interesting. Yes, I mean, if you mention Sylheti, if you go outside India and mention Sylheti, Sylhetis are associated with England, actually, and particularly London, right? We know, of course, this huge Sylheti presence, particularly in England, right? Of course, they are, present everywhere. And this is also a very interesting story, a very long history of migration of particularly Sylheti Muslims to Britain and elsewhere. Of course, after partition, Sylhet became an independent, part of Bangladesh. Independent meaning it became part of first East Pakistan and later after 1971, of course, Bangladesh. And of course, by Sylheti now, everybody understands, takes it that you are from Bangladesh, right? So it is, of course, very hard to explain that there are also Sylhetis in India. Because unlike, this is a very, somebody pointed out to me that it's interesting that when, Punjab was also partitioned, right? But we have a Punjab in India. So there is a name, right? And there is a Punjab in Pakistan. So when you say you are from Punjab, there is, again, territory comes in, and it's very important because there is an identification with the territory. But when you mention you are from Sylhet, right, or you are a Sylheti, then nobody can, tell that, I mean, there's absolutely no chance that you would belong to India because there's no Sylhet in India, right? So we do have that small, that part, right, the 3.5 thanas, but it's not called Sylhet, right? And therefore, and it's part of Assam. So there is no Sylheti as such. So the identification of Sylhetis is with Sylhet, right? And Sylhet, the Sylhet that is in Bangladesh now. Now I think, there is some, in fact, I have had very interesting discussions and collaborations with Bangladeshi Sylhetis based in Britain. So, in fact, just a month, 2 months ago in October, I delivered a lecture to the Brick Lane Circle. It's a very interesting group of Bangladeshi intellectuals, not led by a Sylheti at all, but they reached out to me and so on. And, and I'm an Indian Sylheti. So there is no category as such called Indian Sylheti that is recognized anywhere, right? But of course, as I said that, I interacted with them and they were surprised. There are some Sylhetis who are surprised, or Bangladeshis are surprised to know that there are Sylhetis in India even now. And they continue to speak the dialect and so on. And especially if you go to Barak Valley, right? This is a mini Sylhet, right? So, of course, so the relationship is, if at all there is a relationship, and I think it's slowly, taking off, and it's a warm, nice relationship, of course, very nice, very warm, and they're willing to listen to you. I traveled to Sylhet, in fact, in 2015, I traveled to Sylhet, and I was given a very warm welcome. And this thing has to now move to the diaspora. So, as I said, that small beginnings are being made, and I hope, things will be better.
On that positive note, thank you so much for the conversation. I hope our listeners learn a lot on Sylhet, something and a region which is particularly not given due importance in both academic and non-academic press. But we learned a lot from this interview, ma'am. Thank you so much for taking time out to do this.
Thank you so much.